Open the door, Ann. She's ready. Okay. All right. Hit the trail, boys!
Mayberry always looked like the purest version of the American dream. A small town, kind-hearted people, and simple life lessons wrapped in gentle laughter. But don't let the whistle of the opening theme fool you. Because behind every episode stood real people, and not all of them got the peaceful endings their characters did. The Andy Griffith Show wasn't just a sitcom. It was television frozen in time, where every problem had a simple answer, and life moved at the speed of a porch swing. But the lives of those who built that illusion were far more complicated. While audiences smiled at Barney Fife's nervous charm, Andy Taylor's quiet wisdom, or Aunt Bee's tireless care, the cast behind them faced years of loneliness, illness, regret, and silent exits from the stage. Some were forgotten before they were gone. Others never escaped the shadows of their iconic roles. And a few, like Frances Bavier, met ends that starkly contrasted with the warmth they once gave viewers. They died in isolation, in obscurity, or worse, were erased by time itself. But they deserve to be remembered, not just for what they gave us on screen, but for what they sacrificed to bring to life a town that never truly existed, yet became America's collective memory. This isn't a sad song. It's an unmasking, and it starts with the man who stood at the center of it all, Andy Griffith. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, not just the legends, but the truths behind them, then subscribe to Hollywood Everlast. There's more than nostalgia here. There's revelation. Andy Griffith, the man who built Mayberry and wanted no funeral. Andy Griffith wasn't just the face of Mayberry. He was Mayberry. Calm, kind, and fatherly on screen, he gave Americans the illusion of a town untouched by chaos. But the man behind Sheriff Andy Taylor carried more shadows than smiles. Born poor in North Carolina in 1926, Andy Griffith dreamed of music, not stardom. He studied opera before comedy found him. His breakout performance in A Face in the Crowd, 1957, showed just how dark he could go, playing a power-hungry populace that felt decades ahead of its time. But it was the Andy Griffith Show in 1960 that made him a household name. As Andy Taylor, he represented stability during an unstable era. But Griffith was no folksy pushover. He controlled the show's tone, demanded perfection, and didn't always play nice behind the scenes. When Don Knotts left after 5 seasons, believing the show would end, Griffith later confessed he regretted not fighting harder to keep him. Without Knotts, Mayberry lost its heartbeat. His second act came with Matlock, but even then, illness followed. In 1983, a rare disorder left him temporarily paralyzed. He clawed back, stronger, but more withdrawn. When he died in 2012 of a heart attack, he gave one final order: no funeral, no public goodbye. He was buried just 5 hours later on his private property. No headlines, no procession, just silence. It was the perfect ending for a man who built an eternal town and then vanished from it. Don Knotts, the funniest man in Mayberry, haunted by insecurity. To the world, Don Knotts was pure comedy, bug-eyed, jittery, and brilliantly awkward. As Deputy Barney Fife, he delivered nervous breakdowns with pinpoint timing, and won 5 Emmys doing it. But the man who made millions laugh spent much of his life quietly afraid he wasn't enough. Born in 1924 in West Virginia, Don Knotts grew up in poverty and fear. His father was mentally ill and often violent. Don escaped into ventriloquism as a teenager, then comedy, then acting, always chasing the approval he never got at home. Even at the height of his fame, friends said he was racked with self-doubt. On The Andy Griffith Show, Knotts created one of TV's most iconic characters. Barney Fife was the overeager, underqualified lawman with one bullet in his pocket and a heart 2 sizes too big. He stole every scene, often outshining Andy himself. But in 1965, under the impression that the show was ending, Knotts signed a movie deal with Universal. When the show continued, he was left behind. He never fully recovered from that break. Though he made successful films like The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, the magic of Mayberry was gone. Later in life, he returned briefly as Barney for reunions, and even appeared on Matlock alongside Griffith. But off-camera, his health declined, battling lung cancer, respiratory issues, and depression. In 2006, Don Knotts died in Los Angeles, surrounded by family. He was 81. Andy Griffith later said, "There was no one like him." But maybe that was the problem. Don Knotts made us laugh like no one else, and yet never quite believed he deserved it. Frances Bavier, America's Aunt B, alone at the end. She was the warm heart of Mayberry. Aunt B, with her aprons, pickles, and old-fashioned wisdom, felt like everyone's grandmother. But off-screen, Frances Bavier was far from the cheerful matriarch America loved. Born in New York City in 1902, Bavier came from the theater world, Broadway-trained, classically minded, and by all accounts, difficult. Co-stars described her as moody, proud, and often cold on set. Andy Griffith himself admitted, "There was just something about me she didn't like." She reportedly disliked children and struggled to connect with the casual, improvisational spirit of the show. But none of that showed on screen. Week after week, she delivered tenderness, dignity, and grace, becoming one of the most beloved TV mothers in history. It was a role she never escaped. When the Andy Griffith Show ended, Bavier retreated to Siler City, North Carolina, buying a home sight unseen, believing it to be the peaceful retreat she'd always wanted. But reality didn't match the fantasy. She became reclusive, rarely left the house, and kept the company of 14 cats. Neighbors said she was kind but distant. Some days, they said, she barely spoke to anyone. When she died in 1989, it was from congestive heart failure, just days before her 87th birthday. Her home was found in near ruin, filthy, neglected, and overwhelmed by animals. She left most of her $700,000 estate to a local hospital foundation. Aunt B was a character. Frances Bavier was a mystery. She gave everything to a role that defined her. And when the cameras stopped, she vanished into the quiet corners of a life she didn't seem to want or couldn't escape. George Lindsey, the comic relief who outlived the laughter. He wore a dirty cap, did goofy impressions, and talked like the gas station wasn't just his job, it was his kingdom. As Goober Pyle, George Lindsey brought a kind of simple, lovable absurdity to Mayberry. But behind the laughs was a man caught in a lifelong struggle to be taken seriously. Born in Alabama in 1928, Lindsey wasn't the country bumpkin he played. He earned a degree in biology and taught high school science before turning to acting. He was smart, sharp, and ambitious, but when Hollywood found his goober voice, it never let go. He originally auditioned for the role of Gomer Pyle, but lost out to Jim Nabors. When Nabors got a spin-off, Gomer Pyle, USMC, Lindsey stepped in as his cousin, Goober, a character even more exaggerated, even more foolish. America loved him for it. He hated it. For years, Lindsey played Goober across the Andy Griffith Show, Mayberry RFD, and later Hee Haw, milking every laugh from every line. But when the spotlight faded, he found himself trapped in a caricature. Casting directors didn't see an actor, they saw Goober. Even guest spots on shows like Gunsmoke and The Twilight Zone couldn't shake the label. He kept busy, made money, stayed in the public eye. But his personal life unraveled. Divorce, depression, and the pain of being typecast haunted him. He admitted in interviews that he longed for dramatic roles, for respect. But it never fully came. When George Lindsey died in 2012 at age 83, the obituaries all said the same thing. Goober has passed. And maybe that's what hurt the most, that even in death, the man disappeared behind the punchline. He made millions laugh, but he died as a joke few ever looked beyond. Howard McNear, the barber who kept smiling through the stroke. Floyd the barber was a fixture in Mayberry. Chatty, cheerful, and always perched in front of his shop like a small-town philosopher. But Howard McNear, the actor behind that gentle voice and awkward charm, was fighting a battle no one on screen could see. Born in Los Angeles in 1905, McNear was a seasoned radio actor long before TV found him. He originated the voice of Doc Adams on Gunsmoke, long before it ever became a TV Western. He had the voice, the timing, and a face made for the fringe. Quirky, expressive, unforgettable. When he joined the Andy Griffith Show in 1961, his portrayal of Floyd brought a subtle absurdity to the town. He mumbled. He meandered. He was eccentric, but never mean, a Mayberry original. Then in 1963, tragedy struck. McNear suffered a massive stroke that paralyzed much of his left side. Most actors would have disappeared quietly, but Griffith and the producers refused to let him go. They brought him back, with a twist. From that point on, every scene with Floyd was carefully staged. McNear was always seated, propped up, or shot in close-up. He couldn't move much, but he still delivered his lines, still smiled, still made people laugh. Viewers never noticed, or never knew. But the toll was real. McNear was visibly weaker. His timing, once razor-sharp, became slower. His eyes sometimes looked lost. Yet he kept showing up, kept giving what little strength he had left to a role that gave him purpose. In 1967, his health finally gave out for good. He died 2 years later, in 1969, at just 63. Howard McNear taught us something Mayberry rarely said out loud: that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes, it looks like a broken man in a barber's chair, still telling stories, still smiling for the town that never saw him fade. Hal Smith, the town drunk who lived clean and died quiet. Otis Campbell was Mayberry's lovable drunk, the man who checked himself into jail every Saturday night and slept it off with a smile. He was silly, harmless, a symbol of small-town indulgence. But Hal Smith, the man who played him, lived the opposite of what he portrayed. Born in Michigan in 1916, Smith was a disciplined professional. He served in World War II in the Special Services, entertaining troops overseas. He was a devout family man, a teetotaler, and, ironically, a voice of moral authority in private life. Smith never drank a drop in real life. And yet, to millions, he was the town drunk. His role as Otis was meant to be comic relief, but it quickly became a signature. What few realized was how carefully Smith walked the line between funny and pathetic. Otis was never cruel, never dark. But portraying addiction, even in a sanitized 1960s sitcom, was a delicate dance. Outside Mayberry, Smith had a prolific career. He was one of the most sought-after voice actors in animation. He voiced characters in Winnie the Pooh, the Flintstones, the Jetsons, and even served as a backup voice for Disney's Goofy. He was everywhere, just not in the spotlight. As the years passed, the shadow of Otis never quite lifted. Smith embraced it in public, even reprising the character for public service announcements with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. But in private, he longed for deeper roles, something beyond the drunk tank and swinging cell keys. He died in 1994 of a heart attack. Quietly, without headlines, without fanfare. Hal Smith was a man of discipline who played a man of disorder. And he did it so well, the world forgot the difference. They made us laugh. They made us feel safe. For half an hour each week, they gave us a world where nothing truly hurt, and everyone came home in the end. But the real stories of Andy, Don, Francis, George, Howard, and Hal, those weren't written with laugh tracks or happy endings. They carried burdens far heavier than Mayberry ever showed. Illness, regret, fading fame, isolation. Some died alone. Some were forgotten. Some spent their last years clinging to a past that the world had already moved on from. And yet, none of them ever stopped giving. They kept showing up, smiling through the pain, holding together a dream that didn't belong to them anymore, but still meant everything to us. Mayberry was fiction, but the price these actors paid to keep it alive was very real. And they weren't the only ones. In Part 2, we'll revisit the lives of those who stood at the edges of Mayberry's spotlight, side characters, comic foils, forgotten gems. Some made us laugh once. Some disappeared without a sound. But every one of them deserves to be remembered. So if you believe in honoring the stories behind the smiles, the truth behind the nostalgia, subscribe to Hollywood Everlast. There's more to uncover, and some of the most heartbreaking stories are still waiting in the wings.